I'm here now, I guess. Transformers is the most important series to me ever. It's a series that defined my childhood and defined my life, really. Since I was a child, I remained a dedicated fan of the series and follower of its toy lines and shows. From Generation 1 to the Japanese exclusive series, to the Beast era, to the Unicorn trilogy, the film series, the line continuity, all the way to now is Cyberverse. So, when Transformers gets on Death Battle, it means something to me. But the two episodes we've gotten, I'll have to get to it. Let's talk about the two Transformers episodes right now. Oh boy, well, let's see. Starscream's analysis is annoying. It's not like terrible a lot of the time, but it has this aura of just indifference, I guess. And the ending where they reference Teletran 15 Go-Go was 100% not needed. And of course, the ending clip is one that mocks Starscream, because of course, one of the most beloved and iconic characters in Transformers and arguably all of cartoons gets to be treated like a joke just because of how the first country portrayed him, and ignoring every other piece of fiction about him. Ramo Dashes, meanwhile, is full of just boomstick groaning, which would have been funny if it was just once, but not over and over and over again. It's only when Wiz talks about Ramo Dash's abilities that he stops doing that. And now this is not necessarily a problem with this episode, but the fact that Boomstick feels the need to do this groaning shit with every other My Little Pony episode, I feel bad for the My Little Pony fan base just as much as I feel bad for Starscream, because god, they do not have it good on Death Battle. And there's the fight, and let's get the good stuff out of the way. The voice acting isn't terrible, and the scene where Starscream uses talking skills with Ramo Dash in his crosshairs for his weaponry was good. Aside from that, they remembered to have the transformation sounds be different for vehicle to robot and robot to vehicle. You'd think something as simple as using the right sound effects wouldn't need to be praised, but they somehow didn't have that in the next Transformers episode. But like, the fight itself is just pissing on Starscream. It's a one-sided mockery of the character where he gets completely bodied. Starscream hits Ramo Dash twice, and his first hit does nothing, and his second hit also does nothing. Ramo Dash blitzes the hell out of him, makes a mockery of him on the ground and in the air, including just a painfully obnoxious point of view bit which continues to shit on Starscream. Then Starscream gets fucked up by some lightning, gets his second hit that does nothing, and then a tornado comes out and Starscream gets humiliated again. The only half-decent bit that plays into the characters works off of Starscream's trickery skills and Ramo Dash's kindness, where Ramo Dash narrowly avoids his barrage of missiles with a pretty funny visual gag on the HUD. Then Starscream is taken out by his own missiles while idly standing and gets mangled off screen where his spark shows up and gets vored. Fuck off. This fight just feels like a mockery of one of my favourite characters Death Battle have ever used, a character I love to no end for his personality above all else. A personality that in this fight is used once and the rest of it just makes him look like a fucking idiot and not the brilliant air commander he's meant to be. If they just wanted to shit on the character, why did it have to be Starscream? You know, it's not like Deadpool vs. Mask, where at the very least, they talk about it after the fight in Lampshade. It was a satirical thing. This is an obvious satire or parody or joke. What is the joke if this is a joke episode? The matchup? They take it seriously, and it's not like Transformers vs. My Little Pony couldn't have worked. Or even, like, this matchup couldn't have, especially because we've seen these two franchises fight nowadays, and we know it can be done in an entertaining way. The My Little Pony Transformers comics are pretty entertaining for what they're worth. And the real kicker of all of this is that this episode would not have happened if they decided Starscream was the winner. Really, guys? Fuck off. Fuck off utterly and completely. They only did this episode on the condition that Starscream loses. This episode is utter, complete, dog shit rubbish. It is an insult of an episode, a waste of a season 1 slot, and a mockery of Starscream. Ramo Dash, meanwhile, despite being treated as the fucking ubermensch unstoppable god she apparently is in the fight, gets an analysis where half of it is just, fucking ponies. I rarely feel hate for any episodes, but this episode is the closest I've felt to hatred for one. And if you can't understand why, imagine one of your favourite characters gets to show up on Death Battle, and they just get humiliated and shat on all fight, never getting off a meaningful hit, and they die in a way so humiliating, it literally involves them hitting themselves for being mangled to pieces and their soul consumed. 1 out of 10, never watching it again. Fuck this episode.
And just to blow your mind even more, in order to obliterate Unicron with the Matrix, the energy output must have equaled more than 210 pounds, or just under 100 kilograms.
This episode then. I know this is a fan favorite for a lot of people. That's what makes it a fan favorite, I guess. But do I feel the same? This is the episode that contains my favorite character of all time, Optimus Prime, primarily for his G1 cartoon incarnation. And of course, Optimus vs. Gundam is one of the biggest songs in Death Battle history, and Gundam never stood a chance, so how lovely is that? I guess to start, Gundam's analysis is pretty good. I'm not high on the original Gundam, so maybe this is just my ignorance speaking, but I don't mind overall. Optimus's analysis is... it's not terrible, but it suffers from the compositing problem I've had issues with before, but this time it just bothers me a lot more. Sure, Leonardo is bothersome, and Godzilla would have been bothersome if it wasn't for the fact that Godzilla vs. Gamera is a fight that makes the most sense when using everything both have, given the rivalry, but for Optimus, it annoys me a bit. G1 Cartoon Optimus is my favorite character of all time for very personal reasons. And while I do like IDW Optimus and Marvel Comics Optimus, those aren't my Optimus. It's that thing where they say they don't want to alienate fans of any particular version by compositing, but in compositing, they've actively alienated me. If this was just IDW or just Marvel Comics, then I'd be just as fine as if this was just cartoon. I still like those versions, but just as a fan of Transformers, this is not a character I recognize. This is just some composited, non-existent fan fiction. And no, they're not just the same character, they all have their own identities, they're not any more same characters as Henry Cavill Superman and Christopher Reeve Superman are the same character. And they don't really go into the story much, and that's also a bit disappointing. The only thing I actually enjoyed about this analysis is Wiz quoting The Touch at the very end of it. Aside from that, I just didn't find this particularly fun. Now the fight. This is a huge mixed bag to me, let's take it from the top. The start of this battle is dog shit. Ignoring how Amuro supposedly cuts a hole through the door and then right next scene there's no door, that's just funny. Ignoring the fact that Amuro saying more than meets the eye is both cringeworthy dialogue, but also completely accurate to how Transformers always works the tagline in their series in the most cringeworthy ways possible. The aggressor is Optimus Prime. Literally for no reason, the Autobot arc is abandoned except for Optimus Prime here, who's deciding not to do anything to help out his Autobots. Instead, the moment someone shows up that could help this seemingly bad situation, he just attacks Gundam with a "let's roll." And yeah, I hate how Optimus Prime is characterized here. Optimus, who they explicitly make note of his main weakness being that he's too nice, randomly attacks this guy thinking he's a Decepticon despite the fact he looks nothing like a Transformer, beyond the fact that he's mechanical and large and has the same amount of limbs. Then there's Amuro's beam rifle that he uses immediately, and in this whole sequence he fires 16 shots. This would not be a big deal if it weren't for the fact that they focus on how his gun only has 16 shots and the fight explicitly as Amuro say has 1 shot left, after having fired 16 of them already, meaning he somehow fires 17 shots. I would not have even noticed if the episode didn't have Amuro explicitly mention he had 1 shot left. Also, I don't like this Optimus Prime model, it just looks wrong. It has a silhouette in the head, but the torso looks wrong to me. It looks like some knockoff Prime. Or some random Generations toy that no one gives a shit about. Anyway, this opening gunfight is boring, but it's decent. It's nothing exciting, but I like it enough. Gundam slamming Prime on top of the arc and then struggling with brute strength is a pretty cool bit, but then there's Optimus's line. One of the things I love most about Optimus Prime, or at least the one that I connected with, is summed up in this quote by Larry Cullen, brother of Peter Cullen, the voice of Optimus Prime. "Don't be a Hollywood superhero, be a real superhero. Real superheroes don't yell and act tough, they are tough enough to be gentle, so control yourself." This line involves Optimus Prime yelling and acting tough with no gentleness. Now, okay, look, I don't expect Optimus Prime in a fight to the death to be super gentle, alright? He's throwing his fists around and he's slaughtering an innocent human here. The problem I have is that he's just talking shit. He's smack-talking this guy, boasting about how fucking good he is, calling him vile. And the fact that Death Race did the same thing, it makes me wonder if Death Battle just don't know about Optimus Prime's character at all. Most versions of Optimus go out of their way to offer amnesty and peace against even their most hated enemies, especially G1 Optimus, who to my knowledge only ever shit-talked Megatron, a guy who not only killed him and his girlfriend and his best friend, but also has been in war with him for millions of years. He wouldn't say this is some random fucking goon, and I know this is the line that people pop off for, but fuck this line. It's one of my least favourite lines in Death Battle. And of course, how could I forget they got Optimus Prime's fucking axe wrong, one of his most iconic weapons is meant to come out of his arm, straight out. It's not a physical axe he holds. At least not in any G1 continuity I'm aware. I mean, maybe in IDW, I guess. But you know what? Even in IDW, I doubt he'd be holding onto the raw, coursing energon making up its handle. That would melt his fucking hand. How do you fuck that up? Oh, and another thing. I hate this vocal performance. It's one of the worst vocal performances in all of Death Battle. Okay, it's not quite as bad as Griff or Shadow, but... I mean, it's nowhere near as bad as Griff or Shadow. But this sounds nothing like Optimus Prime. It's just some deep voice with a filter, and he sounds very fucking hostile as well, which just isn't Optimus Prime, man.
Those who tried to harm you are called Decepticons. We must stop them before they destroy your world.
Vile Decepticon, I have been in battle for countless eons.
Amuro sounds fine enough, though. Then we get the setup for an amazing Optimus Prime Energon Axe vs. Gundam Dual Beam Saber I guess we don't get our cool fight then. I do like Optimus firing past Gundam to send him flying so he can do the uppercut from his Megatron fight from the movie, but that's pretty cool. And while they had him fire one too many shots, I like the idea of Amuro running out of ammo and using his final shot for a strategic advantage, where he slaughters the entirety of the Autobot Ark's crew. Oops. Then the two fall to Earth, and... yeah, okay, this part of the fight's fucking baller. The two falling from orbit and crashing leads just a pure fist fight. Optimus jumps out and does his thing from the movie before Amuro destroys his gun, leading to the two slugging it out. Special note to Optimus' axe kick wheel spin taken from Transformers Prime. I like the idea of the Gundam narrowly dodging Optimus' attack, then pinning him to the ground through his arm with a beam saber to knock him over. And then we get the only line worse than all the others in this fight. I must stand, so you must fall. What is this, written by a fucking 3-year-old? I know they're trying to work one shall stand, one shall fall in, but this is pure cringe. I've never cringed more at Death Battle than this fucking line. I must stand, so you must fall? That really does sound like a 2-year-old's attempt at a cool line. Like, thanks for explaining how a fight to the death works, Prime. My little micro brain wouldn't have picked that up. And the death is just this pathetically tiny, weak explosion. So that was the episode, and yeah, as you can tell, I have a lot of problems with it. I still enjoyed it overall, though, because I think the action is fairly decent, and I love the ending up until the death with the fight on Earth. With really dynamic camera action and the tense up-close fight between them, even if it felt maybe a little too one-sided to Prime at the end, which might be intentional because Gundams normally fight in space and this is a battle on Earth, I don't know. But this was not Optimus Prime to me. There are versions of Optimus who would act like this, like Cybertron. No, even he wouldn't say vile Decepticon. I guess Movie Prime? Yeah, that's it. This is Movie vs. Optimus Prime wearing the skin of G1 Optimus Prime, down to the dialogue written by a 2-year-old. And here's the thing. I wanted G1 Optimus Prime in Death Battle to see G1 Optimus Prime in Death Battle. This didn't feel like him to me. Now granted, I've not read all of IDW Transformers, so maybe this is more in line with some moments from that version. But then comes the issue of alienating fans. I'm a big G1 cartoon fan. Well, okay, the cartoon's pretty shit, but this doesn't feel like my favorite character of all time. But there is one thing about this episode that I love without any caveats. Wings of Iron is my favorite Death Battle track of all time. And it remains my favorite Death Battle track of all time. I fucking love it. I just fucking love it, man. It's... oh, Wings of Iron's so good, man. So, I would give this episode a 7, but my bias for Wings of Iron, I'm giving it an 8. I don't think it's an 8 out of 10 episode, and this could have easily been a 9 or a 10, but the fact that this was their take on G1 Optimus drops it down quite a bit. I like this episode, almost out of sheer bias for the fact that it contains a character who looks vaguely like G1 Optimus. But it is the most disappointing episode of Death Battle to me. But I love Wings of Iron, man. And those were the 2 Transformers episodes. That wasn't that long, as should be expected due to there only being 2 episodes, but that was my take. 2 episodes that really disappoint me, with one that brings my piss to a boil. But now that we're approaching the end of every single episode of Death Battle being reviewed, we should do something about that. Anyway, guys, have a good one.